started?
Yeah, let's get started.
Perfect. All right. I see a couple of friendly faces from the small bets community and other places. Okay, well, welcome everyone to another webinar on newsletters. We did this the other night. It went pretty well. Hopefully it will go well again. We won't miss out on anything. We promise we have some valuable stuff to share with you that we've learned. So tonight we're going to go over basically what you can get from starting a newsletter. We've come up with a little bit of a system. We actually teach a course that is 3 weeks long on newsletters, and we've tried to compress all of those. And we also have a free newsletter on all of these lessons as well. So we give a lot of this content away. We've tried to compress everything from that, or the best stuff from that, and we're going to try to give it to you tonight in an hour. And basically, we've come up with a system we call the minimum viable newsletter. We've come up with this idea of modules that we think are really interesting from studying a lot of other newsletters and seeing how our own has evolved over the last year and a half. We're going to talk about getting how a newsletter can give you leverage over the outside world and how it can give you leverage over yourself, right? Because you'll build a regular writing habit. And also we're going to get into how we think you can sort of grow a newsletter. So we've come up with this concept of sort of doing an idea public offering, which is basically taking your nascent ideas from your newsletter and then bringing them out to places like Twitter and LinkedIn that have algorithms. And we'll have some solid examples for you to we have a really good example for you to tonight from one of our students that actually did exactly this and sort of did really well. But first, I think we should tell you a little bit about who we are. Chris?
Sure. My name is Chris. Louis and I, we met each other taking Rite of Passage. It's a writing course, an online writing course, about 1.5 years ago. Before that, I never wrote publicly. The only writing I did was for work, and that's just like memos, emails, that kind of thing. Nothing expressing my true thoughts or anything like that. And the best way to describe me was that I was a consumer. I was reading blogs all day, just watching YouTube videos. I never had like a creative outlet. Never really had people to talk to about ideas. I never created anything. And when I really disliked my job. So the reasoning behind that, I think, is there's a book, Drive, by Daniel Pink, and he talks about motivation. And he says that motivation has 3 factors: autonomy, mastery, purpose. And at work and as a consumer, I had no drive. I had no autonomy, mastery, or purpose in those areas. And I would consider myself to be passive at that. But in the past 1.5 years, I think I have gained in all 3. And the newsletter that I started 1.5 years ago is like emblematic of that. And I think the newsletter has all 3 of those attributes: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I think the act of creation has those qualities also. And for this reason, we believe that newsletters are the easiest ways to switch mindsets from consumer to a creator. So how did I create this change? Well, like I said, Louis and I took a course called Rite of Passage 1.5 years ago. One of the last assignments in Rite of Passage was to create a newsletter. So I've done 66 issues. The 67th will probably come out tomorrow. And this is what we focus on in our course, and that's learning through action. So we believe that we've learned about newsletters by doing them, and we believe that you can't passively learn. If you learn passively, if you just read about it and you don't do anything with it, those concepts stay abstract. When you actively experiment, when you put those notions into play, the experience makes those concepts concrete. So what I learned through this experience is how to be consistent. I've only missed about 4 or 5 issues over that time period. I've learned about iteration. I've learned how to explore new ideas, and we'll talk more about this later. And I'm also more comfortable expressing my views publicly, meeting people online, and finding opportunities through these meetings. And I credit a lot of that to my newsletter. Louis, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Chris. So similar to Chris, I mean, I started my public journey about a year and a half ago around the same time. At the time, I was actually, working in big tech, managing a bunch of engineers. And once I took Rite of Passage, I sort of started this newsletter, and I've published over 70 editions in that last year and a half. I've written a ton of essays. Some of them were included in the newsletter, some of them were not. And according to Twitter, I've tweeted like 10,000 times. And I've built sort of, if you fast forward a little bit, I quit my job in big tech to sort of chase my dreams of entrepreneurship. And I started building a little bit of an audience because I realized that all these SaaS tools and things I was building, I needed to find users, or I would have to pay for marketing. And so, I basically started doing that, and I built a decent sized audience. But I mean, for me, it's pretty good because I'm sort of, pretty awkward and introverted. I had all these fears, imposter syndrome. I had a pretty successful career in big tech, and I was kind of coming out into this public space, and I was afraid of looking like an idiot, basically. And having a newsletter sort of allowed me to share things with a small group of people that really liked me in the beginning, because it was just like friends and family, like no one really knew about it. And then over time, those ideas kind of marinated and became a lot bigger. And then, obviously I took those things public, and that's where the audience comes in. And a lot of those people from the public then join the newsletter, and so on. And so here we are. So now we're going to talk a little bit about why newsletters and our concept of how we can make this as easy as possible. Chris, you want to maybe get into this a little bit?
Sure. Like Louis said, we're trying to make newsletters easy. We're trying to make it fun. So, and one of the most important reasons we believe in newsletters is that we think it will turn you from a consumer to a creator, like I said before. And you get the increase in autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And the way we think about it in terms of making it easy and fun is through a concept we call the minimum viable newsletter. And that is making the newsletter, the effort in creating your newsletter as easy as possible. And we do that by lowering the bar. So what does lowering the bar means? It means doing it the easy way, like the Staples button, the big Staples red button. So for example, if you're cooking, you don't want to make a 10-course meal. You just want to make a cheese omelet when you're starting. If you're exercising, when you start off exercising, you don't want to go out the first day and run a marathon. You want to go out and run for 5 minutes. James Clear, he wrote a book called Atomic Habits about creating habits. And he says that to get yourself flossing, you should just floss 1 tooth a day, and then 2 teeth. And then eventually you'll get around to where flossing your whole mouth is easy. So what does this look like in a newsletter? We believe that if you use modules, it makes newsletters very easy. And modules are sections of your newsletter. So for example, you could have a module where you're writing an essay. You can have a module where you recommend YouTube videos. You can have a module on places to explore in your city, or giving reviews on new equipment that you bought. A module can be on any topic you can imagine, and it could be in any sort of presentation, like presentation manner, like reviews or suggestions or such. Just keep in mind that the module should be in topics that you actually are interested in and that you actually consume regularly. And then once you have the module, it's easy to fill in the buckets, right? If you know that you have a module on YouTube videos, then you know that to fill that module in, you just need to go to the YouTube videos that you watched and say, hey, what was the 3 best ones that I saw this past week, right? If you don't have these modules, it's very hard to come up with material. You have to brainstorm each week of different things. So the other thing is, when you have these modules all thought out, you know exactly what you want to fill. And you become more alert to the things that you need to fill. So when you're watching YouTube videos, for example, you'll have that in mind that, oh, I want to share this. Same thing goes with any other module. For example, if you have a recipe module when you're cooking, you'd be like, oh, this is really fun. I want to share this. So, like I said, the modules have to be on topics that you consume regularly, right? You have to make the newsletter fit your lifestyle. If you are, if you're on topics that you don't normally consume, if you want to do it on the Civil War and you have no interest in the Civil War, then it's gonna be homework filling out each module, right? So whatever you do during the week is what you want to focus the modules on. If you watch YouTube videos, like I said, I don't know, I'm using a sample every time, but if you watch YouTube videos, then you might want to do a YouTube video. If you watch golf, maybe you want to have a module on golf. And if you're having difficulty, just lower the bar, right? So if you have 4 modules, maybe you just want to have 3 modules. If you have 5 examples for each module, maybe you only want to share 3 examples in each module. And we have a couple examples. Lou, you want to bring up Rohan's?
Yep, here it is.
So this newsletter is by Rohan Jaran. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And all he does is share 3 tweets and then a little 1 sentence or like very short paragraph description of those tweets. So I assume that he's on Twitter regularly, and it's very easy for him to note down 3 tweets that he likes and then quick description of it. So this is just an example of how easy a newsletter could be. I doubt it takes them more than 10 minutes to put this together each week. And then Louis has another example from his own life on lightning load.
Yeah, so similar to Rohan, I mean, mine has a couple of modules, and mine's a little bit longer than his. But really, I mean, there's still a lot of value. I know, Rohan, for example, I know that, he's got a pretty large sized audience on Twitter. The guy is in real estate. He's keeping a bunch of, even though he's only sending a couple of tweets, that he liked that week, he's keeping a lot of people clued into his journey, right? And a lot of those people some of them are, I know he's raised capital, for example, from his newsletter, which is something that, you wouldn't think that you could do that from 3 tweets, but we're going to show you that a lot of strange things can happen when you clue people into your journey over a long period of time, the way that he's done. And so this example is basically like a quick 4-minute read, but very similar to Rohan. I have a couple of modules. You may not notice right away, but I've got a couple of tweets I enjoyed, a couple of memes. And these things are things that I already consume. And so I'm already like bookmarking them and I'm saving them. And so they're basically part of my everyday environment. And I'm pretty well trained about what's funny. And, I mean, there's a lot of value to human curation, right? Because the algorithms are pushing a lot of junk. And so, you're going to have a really good eye, and people are going to appreciate that you're curating that for them in this sea of junk, right? And so anyway, we're giving this example of this edition because I was on vacation with my wife, and I didn't bring a laptop with me. I wrote this whole thing on my phone, and then basically it's just a quick little update. The first module is just a quick little update on my life. That's me and my beautiful wife. And I basically wrote a little bit about this island that the U.S. government had bought, how they were thinking long term. They bought it. It must not have been easy to buy an island and administer it and all this other stuff. So how they were thinking long term back then. And what's really interesting is that even from this newsletter, that is just me on my vacation, and I talk a little bit about Buffett because of the few of the tweets I ran into, and Buffett's also talking about thinking long term. I had a bunch of people reply to me on the newsletter and basically, send me down these rabbit holes. And one of them showed me this poem by Robert Frost about thinking long term and immigrating to the US, and a couple of, really fascinating things that gave me even more ideas. So the point is, like, if I hadn't sent this out that week, which was like really pretty easy to do, it took me about a half hour on my iPhone, literally on my iPhone, and I just pasted it into the Ghost and sent it out, right? But I kept everybody clued in, and I had more than a few conversations from this thing. And, there's a lot of really good stuff that comes out of it, even though it might seem like, what's the point of sending out sort of 3 tweets? But it turns out there's actually a lot of value to that. And so, and again, my newsletter over time, it started out, it was just 3 tweets and 3 memes. And then, I got braver as I kept doing this. I started giving a personal update, and, and then, it turned into, and now every week I send an essay. An essay is one of my modules along with the other stuff. And so, but, it's still very, very easy for me to fill that in. I mean, I don't want to be spending hours doing research to try to send people a newsletter. And I think that's sort of the beauty of newsletters, is that they start, like we said, they can fit your lifestyle, and over time, as you get better at this, you can do more and more. So I think we want to talk a little bit about what you could kind of, so I think we basically, the goal with the last slide was just to convince you that this is easy. Like anyone can do this. Like Rohan's literally sending 3 tweets. I mean, if you're on Twitter, like you see a couple of good tweets and you could send that, right? And so the point is like, but what can you get with that? Like, so it's easy, but what's the point, right? Like what can you get? And so, the thing is, you're going to get leverage, right? Leverage over the world. And it's an interesting thing. And obviously I'm a software engineer. I'm also invested in real estate, but all of those things, and all of those things can give you leverage. Like I'm invested in real estate. I had to go to the banks to borrow money. Some of you may or may not know if you follow me on Twitter, but I come from poverty. It wasn't easy to convince the banks to loan me a bunch of money to buy homes. I had to show proof of income. I need a lot of permission basically to get that going. And also that kind of leverage comes with a lot of downside. Like I could go bankrupt tomorrow, right? But writing a newsletter, you're not, I mean, I guess you could get canceled if you do something really crazy, but probably not, right? So writing a newsletter is, there's very minimal downside in comparison. And you could still get a ton of leverage, right? Because media has a ton of leverage. I've gotten, investment opportunities. People want to invest in some of my SaaS stuff from newsletters that I wrote, where I included people into what I was building and things like that, right? So really interesting things happen over time as you kind of build a body of work and as you send this thing out. And so, another sort of example of, I mean, even labor, right? Labor is leverage. Like I used to manage engineers. I had a bunch of engineering teams under me. Like every single time I wanted to hire somebody, I had to spend time interviewing them. I had to, they had to want to work with me, right? So I needed their permission to join me, and then I had to manage them. And so that, obviously, there's no such thing as free leverage, except, media is actually as free as it gets. I mean, it could cost you nothing to kind of start a newsletter and get this going, right? And so what's come out of this, I did this course earlier this year, about 9 months ago, on engineering management, right? Something that I'm pretty passionate about. I did a little course on it, and it's made over 50 grand, which isn't a lot of money, but every single, I mean, it's good money, but the point is, like, every single day it sells a little bit, and I have no idea sort of how people are finding it, but my guess is that, people in my newsletter are talking about it. They're finding old editions because SEO is picking them up. And so there's all this leverage out there now over the world, and it's just bringing me money, a little bit of money every day. And so why not do this is the point, right? I mean, you're going to have to invest a little time, but there's no kind of leverage that you could get over the world without putting some time in. But usually you have to put a lot more than just time. And then, Chris and I really believe that you're going to get more than just leverage over the world. I mean, you're going to get leverage over yourself, right? Because you're promising people that you're going to be sending them out something every week, and that turns out to be a really powerful thing. Chris, you want to talk a little bit about internal leverage?
Sure. Like Louis said, internal leverage is leverage over yourself, and what we mean by that is that it forces yourself to improve. You can use the newsletters to improve yourself and your ideas. And the way that happens is that a weekly newsletter, it gives you tons of repetitions, right? Every week you're doing it again and again. And it's a forcing function for you to write and to share your ideas. So you'll get personal growth from doing it. First of all, you'll practice your writing. Writing a newsletter every week, you'll probably write between 500 to 1,000 words every week. And then you'll also improve your ideas. When your readers read it, some of them will respond, give you counter arguments, tell you that it doesn't make any sense, and whatnot. And then that'll help you develop your ideas and come up with more examples and such. And then you can also develop ideas from nothing, right? You could write something and you don't think it's anything behind it. It's just something off the cuff. And then someone comes back and says, I really like that. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me. And from there, you're like, oh, a lot of your best ideas, they sound very obvious to yourself, but they're very interesting to other people. So we believe that learning is from iteration and feedback cycles, flywheels, and that newsletters are forcing functions to stay in the game. So Louis is going to talk about how to grow a newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, Chris, to sort of sort of add to this. I mean, the thing about, newsletters is that, as we mentioned, with the minimum viable newsletter with modules, like, you don't actually need to be a great writer, right? Like, you're just kind of sending a little quick thing, and so, we know a lot of folks that started newsletters where English is not even their first language, and it's their newsletters in English, and it's perfect, right? The thing about writing long essays, a lot of people want to get into this online writing game, right? And they all want to, they all say, well, I'm going to write these long essays. But to write a long essay, you need something cohesive. Like, you need an introduction, a conclusion. It needs to make sense, right? But a newsletter is just your lifestyle. I mean, literally, like, and it's going to do like the personal growth stuff that Chris talked about. I mean, you're going to be on the lookout for better tweets, for better videos. You're going to consume less junk because now you're producing things. You're going to send out something to your friends and family at the end of the week, and and strangers that like you, right? That are rooting for you. And so you're going to become a better consumer if you sort of do this. So it's pretty good leverage, I would say, over the self. Okay. So far we told you that this could be easy. I think we convinced you that hopefully we convinced you that there's real good reason to do it, even though it's really easy. But you might be saying, okay, but how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to grow this? And the good news is, like I said, I could be pretty awkward with strangers. Luckily, there's a lot of familiar faces here, and it's not a huge group, so I'm doing just fine. But generally, I could be pretty awkward with strangers. And so the point is that if I could do this, it's good news for you. You could probably grow a newsletter too, right? And so Chris and I believe, they're the perfect vehicle for people that are more introverted or maybe have more imposter syndrome to get started with writing online. Because the truth is, right, we have this whole concept that we came up with of the medium spectrum and the content spectrum. The truth is, to make meaningful connections, for somebody to want to help you with something, first of all, you have to give them something, but also you have to talk about something meaningful. I mean, you can't just talk about the weather and expect somebody to like want to invest in your company, right? Like, you're going to have to talk about, things that mean something to you. But the problem is, a lot of us can't just go on Twitter and start talking about our salary, or can't go on Twitter and talk about our financials on day one, right? Like, we kind of have to work our way up to that, right? And so what happens is you send it in your newsletter. It's a safe environment. I mean, you don't even have to, technically, it's a semi-private space, right? Like, you don't even have to publish it online. You could just send the newsletter, and then the people that are on there, you kick people off if you're really introverted or really worried about, maybe your job seeing it. But the point is that you could get this going, you could iterate on ideas, you could share more meaningful stuff, and as you build up confidence, you could basically start sharing more deep and personal things. And we believe that you have to do that. Like, some people don't have a problem with this, right? Like, some people are very extroverted. They can just come out and just share whatever, like, here's everything, and they have no problem with transparency. I had a huge problem with that getting started, and I spent a few months writing things, and it was very shallow and observational stuff, and it wasn't like I would, it was stuff that meant something to me, but I never connected it to me, so the other person reading had no idea that it meant something to me, right? But the point is, like, you have to go up here, you have to share things that, and you have to talk about yourself a little bit too, right? That's part of how you build a personal brand. That's how you get people to follow you. And I mean, if you really want to build a powerful personal brand, right? And so Chris and I believe this, it's really difficult to just talk about, like, it's raining outside and then everybody follows you on Twitter, right? Like, or just very like, I don't know, the people tweet these like very cliche things, you're going to have to get in there and really share some meaningful stuff. And eventually you're going to see that people are, if you give them something and you inspire them, or you entertain them, or you teach them something from your own life, then they're going to do for you, right? They're going to give you back. They're going to amplify your stuff. I mean, they might not even be your target audience in terms of buying things from you, but they're certainly going to amplify. So, like, a lot of the people, I have a hodgepodge of people in my newsletter. Like, there's people that are in there because they enjoy some of the stuff I talk about in real estate. Some people are in there because they enjoy the engineering stuff. Some people are in there because of, like, my life coming up from poverty, whatever it is, right? But the point is that they're all in there. And when I need them to do something to amplify, they come out and they help, right? And it's a fascinating thing. But the only reason why I think they do that is because I'm giving them something. Like, every other week there's something in there because of the modules and things like that. I'm able to share something more deep with them. And so yeah, so we think, right? So to put this whole thing together, we have a concept of an idea public offering. And basically the concept is that you start in this safe space. You work your idea, you send it out to people that really like you. You keep in mind your newsletter is going to be much smaller than your Twitter audience, right? It's really hard to get people to give you their emails. It's much harder than to get them to follow you on Twitter. An inbox is a very personal space, right? For you to be in there, they're really trusting you. And so you're going to have a much smaller subset of your audience in there, but those people really like you if they give you the email, right? And so you're sending them more meaningful stuff, and then they're giving you feedback, right? They're going to respond to you. There's a million things that could happen. They could amplify it for you, but the point is, then you take the stuff that resonates and you take it to Twitter, you take it to LinkedIn in native form. This is what we call an IPO. So if you had a module on there that really resonated with people, you could turn that into a Twitter thread, or you could turn that into a LinkedIn post. And then what happens is people then, strangers get it because of the algorithm, but you already know that the thing is good because you've trialed it in this very private space, and you know that it's meaningful. And then hopefully, if the IPO, and we call it an IPO because similar to a company IPOing, like they may or may the public is going to decide what the price is, and so they're going to decide ultimately if it's worth something or not. But the point is, you do this over and over, and eventually you're going to have some hits. And when you have a hit, when it goes big on Twitter, then what's going to happen is a lot of people that really like you from that are going to. David Perel has this concept called the public to private bridge. And he says, basically post stuff on Twitter and then bring people private into the newsletter where you own that interaction, and that's your, you own that list. The problem is for like introverted and maybe, people that, have a little bit of imposter syndrome, it's really hard to go and just bring people from public to private. But so that's where this idea of IPOing comes in, which is that basically you first trial the stuff privately, then you take it public, and then people cross the bridge back to your newsletter, and the cycle, you just keep going. And so we've got a really good example of this. Basically, one of our students, like I said, we ran this. This is we ran a live course. It was a 3-week thing, and we had a bunch of people live, and we workshopped their ideas. We helped them start their newsletter. We gave them feedback on every edition. And one of our standout students, actually, Jonathan, did exactly this. He basically workshopped. He was working on an idea about how to ask for a raise. He's an engineer as well, and he was kind of working on this idea, and he shared little bits in his newsletter over 3 or so editions. And he talks about this, I think over like issue 14 maybe, and he says, yeah. So basically, he talks a little bit about how he got a raise, right? Like he's actually giving concrete numbers here. This is something he would have never like done on day one, to go out and say, I got a 48% raise, right? Like it's, it takes some guts to do that, right? To share stuff that's really personal, right? Because now like his family members are like, wait, you got what? Or whoever, right? Like strangers are like, whoa, you got a big raise, dude, like give me some money. But he did this over a few editions of his newsletter, and then eventually he started taking that idea more public. So he turned that into a blog post first, and then he turned that into a Twitter thread for a place that has an algorithm. And the entire time, like we were workshopping this thing, and then look what happened, right? And this is somebody that and this is us, like during the course, we have this tool. You could use a Google Doc, whatever, it doesn't matter. But this tool that I built where we give feedback on Twitter threads and things like that. And so we gave him a little bit of feedback on the thread, and basically this thing went viral, and it did really well for him. And I'm trying to find the actual. And so Jonathan is not super active on Twitter, right? But look at this thing. I mean, this thing went really, pretty big, right? For somebody that at the time he had a couple of hundred followers. Now he's got over 1,000, and almost all of them are from this. But a bunch of people went back to his newsletter because he's sharing deep, meaningful stuff that can actually help somebody. And people know they can trust him because it's obviously, from his life, right? Like he's being very concrete, and he workshopped this thing. And so the point is that, it's really hard to come out and do this on day one out here, right? But you could do it in a safe space, and that's what he did. And then he turned that into, he IPO'd that idea, and then boom, people started coming back to his newsletter. And, obviously, again, he's not somebody that's super active on Twitter. He's pretty active, but like he doesn't post every day. But so this is, but he does write his newsletter all the time. And this is the point, right? Like you come out here, when you come out here, you're going to come out here with some good ideas because you've already worked through it. Like you shared it with a bunch of people. And anyway, so we kind of want to highlight how this whole thing, end to end, we basically came up with a concept, which is called, the idea public offering. And I think actually Jonahan, he talked about it in his thing, the content flywheel. He says, but I just kind of want to share the concept real quick. And Chris, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So the content flywheel is basically all of our sort of writing. Actually, do you want to let's take a talk as
We'll take questions right after this because I think this is our last slide, and then we'll get into some discussion and questions if you don't mind. Chris, you can
so this is basically all of our sort of newsletter philosophies all in one infographic, and we really believe that learning is iterative. So what the content flywheel is showing the feedback cycle between the newsletter and your audience. So the goal for us from newsletters is to bring your ideas into the world and to build deeper connections. We believe that ideas are fragile, like newborns. Harsh criticism can kill them. But newsletters provide a safe space to incubate your ideas. They allow you to move up the topic spectrum and the medium spectrum. So, like Louis said, your most vulnerable and authentic ideas are the most valuable, but those are also the hardest to share, especially if you're introverted and not very comfortable about sharing with other people, or you have imposter syndrome, you don't think you're an expert. But we also think expertise is a spectrum, right? If you're intermediate, a beginner will think you're an expert. So it's always someone who can learn from you and other people who can. Sharing your ideas with people you trust will grow them to the point where they can survive once they're released with message. So what we really believe is that you need to develop your ideas in order to share them with other people, with strangers, right? You need to develop your ideas in order to share them with strangers. So how do you do that? Well, I mean, you could do it just by thinking it by yourself in a cabin in the woods, or you could share them with the friendly audience, right? And we believe that your newsletter audience is a friendly audience. You can incubate your ideas privately, crowdsource them with a friendly crowd, and then when you release them to the public, they'll be more impactful and attract more people to your home base. And you'll have more conversations with this larger group, which will give you more ideas. So that's what we're illustrating with the content flywheel. You start off with your own ideas, you share it with your newsletter in a safe space, and then you'll probably get some conversations from that. People will reply directly to your newsletter and let you know what ideas of yours are the best, and then you can work on those ideas and eventually put those out to a larger audience on Twitter or some other medium. And then once it's out in the public channels, more people hopefully will follow you, and then you'll get more ideas from these people, and the cycle repeats. So we believe that you can't improve without iteration, but this also means that if you do iterate, you will improve. And no matter where you start, if you have enough reps, you'll get there. So why is this important? So Louis is just going to finish up on why we think this is important.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I guess this is the last slide. So, I mean, I hope we sort of convinced you that basically it's pretty easy to do this. 3 tweets, right? Rohan's sending out 3 tweets with like a little summary, a little update sometimes from his life. And so it's pretty easy to do this. And then on top of that, there's a lot of value to doing it. And actually, it's possible to grow it, right? And why would you want to do this? I mean, you want to do this because, first of all, for the personal growth, right? But also you know, what's going on right now in the world. I mean, basically that, you know, everything is junk almost everywhere on all of these social platforms. A lot of them are becoming TikTokified, which is, you know, I don't know. I mean, I was talking to Danny actually tonight before this started, and you know, I have so many like shirts that go hard or useless videos that are just like just draining my mental energy on my Twitter feed, and I don't see the people that I want to follow on there anymore. But a newsletter doesn't work like that, right? Like everyone's gonna, there's no algorithm dictating, unless of course, like, you know, people unsubscribe or you end up in junk because you're abusing it. But there's no algorithm dictating who sees your stuff. Everyone's going to see your stuff. And so what's happening with this TikTokification is that you know, I've built a decent sized, I mean, it's not very big, but I built a decent sized following, let's say, but only a fraction of those people see my tweets, right? But on my newsletter, 100% of them see my newsletter, right? Every week I have a chance to talk to these people and stay top of mind, and they root for me and all of that. And so, you know, and so, but, you know, and with this TikTokification, I mean, you're seeing big people with big audiences, like the Kardashians were upset in Instagram because they have like 2 million followers, and a fraction, you know, because the stuff that's going viral is the mindless stuff. It's not, I mean, their stuff is pretty mindless too, but there's, you know, their stuff is not the mindless stuff that's going viral. Their own audience doesn't see it. And so the point is, and the, you know, the point is that with a newsletter, you own all of that. You don't have to worry about that. You have this direct relationship with these people every week. And, you know, obviously with that comes some responsibility. As we said, you want to try to do a good job, but that's going to force self-improvement. And then, you know, the other thing is, like, basically in your newsletter, all of the rules of the internet game apply. You know, you're gonna build these assets that you could reuse later. You're gonna build deep, meaningful relationships, and you're giving to a group of people that really likes you, right? And that's what you want to be doing. You want to help them, right? And then, you know, you're going to be establishing a lot of credibility with these people. And when you need something, let's say you have a new app and you need them to go upvote it or something, they're going to be very likely to do that, right? Because they've gotten a lot from you over the year or whatever it is. And you know, so we think it basically it's a no-brainer, right, to do this, and especially if you're like on the fence. Chris and I, but we're obviously very biased. So yeah, I think, you know, I think that's all we sort of had, right, Chris? We want to get into some questions and answers, but just real quick, before we do that, we do have this newsletter about newsletters, and we're 12 lessons in, and it's free. You just go and you sign up for it, and every 2 weeks or so, we're giving away some of these lessons. Not, you know, all of our lessons eventually, basically, and you know, this will hopefully help you start and grow a newsletter and all of that. And if you're the kind of person that could just do this on your own, you know, this is a really good way to do it. But, you know, as Chris mentioned, we also have a live course that we're going to be running, and it's a 3-week course, but we're going to publish 4 editions. Everybody's going to publish 4 editions. Chris and I are going to. It starts next week. If you want to do it as part of a community, Chris and I are going to give feedback on every edition. We're basically going to workshop the newsletters live, and we're going to find ideas we can IPO along the way, just like we did with Jonahan. And so you have that option if you want to upgrade, but if you don't have to, it's just you could sign up for the free you know, newsletter Launchpad. We're giving all this content away because the live in the community is more for people that kind of want to do this with sort of a group of other people. I think that's sort of all I had to say, and I want to open it up now to questions. I know Taka had his hand up.
Yep, I've been waiting. Louis, Chris, thanks
Sorry,
for
man.
this. It's been very helpful. I have a couple questions actually. One is, can you go back to the slide on Jonahan?
Yes, absolutely. 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay.
So I was curious about, okay, so the steps he took. The first one was he wrote this for his newsletter, right? Is that right?
So,
and then
yeah, exactly. So he worked through it. Like, he basically, this is his 14th edition. You can see this is July 9th. The actual tweet, we worked on the Twitter thread before he published the Twitter thread. The Twitter thread went out July 12th. So he, you know, but he talked about this idea. This wasn't the first time he talked about it. If we go back to like 13, he's hinting at this. I idea of getting a raise. And, he's talking a little bit about thoughts that he had. And, so he's kind of workshopping, like he had, this idea of building a brag doc, which was right before that edition. So he kind of worked it over 2 or 3 editions, if you will.
And was he getting like feedback from his readers, or like what made him decide to write on this specific topic for for his main newsletter?
So
I guess?
this idea right here, we told him this is a money idea. Like this, you have to IPO this.
I think he got some feedback also before, that's why he kept writing about it in issue 13 and 14.
I mean, he was down this path, and we were giving him feedback the entire time. But the point is, like, it was pretty obvious that this is like going to be a really good thread, and it was just like, but he would have never come out and shared these numbers and things like that over on Twitter on day one. Again, he doesn't post as regularly, and so he would have never done this. But I think we're obviously subscribers of his.
Right.
We all subscribe to each other. I mean, that's part of like the live courses. Like we're giving each other kind of feedback each week, and so that's really how it was surfaced. If that answers the question, Tucker.
Great, thank you. And one more question is, when you two are starting out, so if you have like a small number of subscribers, I imagine it's hard to get feedback from your readers. So I was wondering, what was your transition like from like, tweeting these really short memes and tweets to like writing something longer? Like what kind of signals were you getting when you decided to do that?
So the really nice thing is that it's all sort of public, and we could go back to
Right.
we could go back and we could see, when I was first starting, right, and I was giving like a little update starting with like, just even a couple of issues in, but maybe like if I go back a little bit more, you could see that, let's say, leverage. I'm talking about leverage on this one, and it's just a quick update. It's very short, and 4 tweets and 3 articles I read. And so the transition was like maybe around the 10th edition, I started seeing that, hey, I should expand the personal thing, because people were emailing me and saying, about the different things I was sharing about my personal life in that thing. And then I got really, I started becoming braver and braver, right? Which is part of like overcoming imposter syndrome. Like I wrote about the Ukraine war, which is something that I would never even tweet about that, right? But I wrote about it because I'm from Eastern Europe. And this thing, at the time when it happened, I had all these emotions about it. I wrote about it. It was in my newsletter, and I got so many replies to this. It's crazy. There's just other people that were feeling the same thing, and just we're building these relationships, right? And so the thing that Taka is that I did at this point in time, man. This is like most is March 4th of 2021. Basically, like I'm sorry, this is actually 46. If we go back to earlier editions, like 10, it's March of 2021, and so I had a very, very tiny audience. I didn't start getting a lot of Twitter followers and things like that maybe until July, August, September of 2021. And all of these previous editions, which were in May and June, which is kind of when I started, you could see that it was just maybe like a handful of people on there, 50 to 100 people maximum. And 50 to 100 people are going to be they're going to be mostly friends and family. Like part of the course is like we do these like cold outreach, like email all your friends and family and tell them to get on this thing, because it's part of the forcing function, right? Like if these people are expecting an update from you, some of them will actually email you and say, well, you didn't send me the thing, which is really good. I mean, you want that accountability. And so it was a very tiny group, but even from that tiny group, because it's people that care about you, they're much more likely to reply. And you have to set it up so they can reply. I mean, that's a really important aspect of it.
Right. Got it.
Does that kind of answer some of it?
Yeah. So I guess your answer is that you are getting more replies, and that's why you decided sort of to expand this into a bigger bet, so to speak, because at first it seems like, you were doing small bets by just sending out these short letters.
Exactly.
So, okay.
Exactly that. And exactly. And it just sort of evolved. And as it evolved, I added more to it. And that's part of it. Is like, part of what we tell people when they take the course, we start with this weekly cadence. And sometimes, people go to bi-weekly because maybe weekly is too much or, but the point is you're keeping a bunch of people clued in and there's still a lot of value, so yeah. I think Kim had a question maybe?
Thank you.
Of course. Is it Kim Sia or am I saying it wrong?
Yes, no, you are fine. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes, we can hear you.
Right. I'm sorry if I'm not sure whether my video is working. So I want to first thank Chris for answering my email since the last webinar, I think 2 days ago. So I appreciate that. My question is a little bit along the same direction as what I believe his name is Tucker was asking, and also pertaining to your content flywheel. So your content flywheel has this, like the first two notes, or like first you start with your thoughts and then you get feedback and reflections. Now the issue here is, let's say I'm a total unknown, which I am. I start a brand new newsletter. The second step will be getting the feedback, because newsletter is what you call a safe space, right? But somebody has to read it to give you feedback.
Yep.
The question is, because it's a chicken and egg problem. Precisely because I'm brand new, who's gonna read and give me feedback? And specifically, I've noticed, because this is there are several other writing programs that I've joined. I realized people, when you put it out there, whatever you call your safe space to be, people don't tend to give you feedback, or they give you very generic feedback. It's only when I took the initiative to take the outline of whatever I've written and then DM a specific friend that I've met on this community and ask, hey, what do you think? They start to give, because it's a DM between one-on-one, right? They start to give very specific, very useful feedback. So my question would be, I know you have like 3 tiers, there's a video and then there's something else, and then finally there's a community thing, right? Does the community enforce the members to give feedback for each other? Or is there a structure to this? Is it compulsory? Is it voluntary? I'd like to hear a little bit more about the mechanics of it.
Yeah,
and maybe directionally, how does this even make sense for the chicken and egg dilemma I was talking about? Thank you.
Well, exactly. So I'm going to try to answer. There was a few questions there. So how do we elicit feedback was the first one. So I think, just to tackle that one first, basically, getting feedback, you're 100% right. Like, I did Ship 30 last year. I took the course, and, in Ship 30, they say you're going to get feedback in the tweets, right? Like you do it publicly. But the truth is, no one's going to like roast you on Twitter, but you need to be improved, right? Like you need to improve. So you need to hear, like, and so part of what we do in the course is like we show people how to ask, how to elicit that feedback. And sometimes when you have, if you go, I can't think of the exact edition, but we basically, you will ask people directly and say, hey, if you think I'm being stupid right now, please let me know. Like I want to know, like truly, like, is this a good idea or not? Like I'm about to invest a bunch of time. I want you to tell me. And what happens is, I've got former, former bosses that are subscribed in there, mentors of mine. And man, when you say that, like when you say, please respond to this directly, and you let them know in the edition, and most people, the people that care about you will, right? Like they'll say, this is a stupid idea. Don't do this, right? Like they'll say that, right? So one of my mentors replied to one of my emails with this like long thing, just roasting me, like, don't do it. Like, you're wrong about this, right? And so how you just ask, right? Because you're giving every week, you're giving them something. When you have a small ask like this, you're going to see that people, especially, this is a direct email conversation between you and this person. This is not public. They're going to be a lot more honest with you, whether it's a good idea, whether it's a bad idea. So that's the first question that you had. The next question you had is basically on exactly the so let me just share my whole screen here and give away or maybe I could just share Slack. So we have this community, and then in the feedback channel, people post, hey, I've got my issue, and this is actually, I guess he took it down now, but people post, and then we go and we leave comments on the Google Docs. And I don't know if he has we we usually give each other, we usually leave comment. You might have cleared those up now that they're done. But the point is, the community's in the, and you're actually not seeing the other screen. Okay. But let me just share the whole screen. But we leave comments on sorry. Okay. So anyway, he's sharing this essay that he wants, part of his newsletter. You can see this now, right? And so he's sharing this inside of the Slack, and we give each other feedback. So that's how it works in the community. So people generally, we don't force people in the community to give feedback, but Chris and I, during the thing, we give intimate feedback to every edition you're going to publish with us. So 4 editions, at least guaranteed, like we're going to look at it. We're going to be your subscribers forever. But even after the course is over, we're active. Like part of why we're building this community is because we want the feedback too, right? And we've been doing it for a year and a half. We've learned some stuff, but we're still learning. Our stuff is still evolving, right? Like maybe, we started this, the newsletter on newsletters. Maybe down the road, we want to do a paid newsletter. There's things we want to do that we haven't done yet, but we've learned a lot. And we've grown our newsletter pretty significantly. And so we can at least teach that and give people feedback. And so during the live course, we give intimate feedback and we subscribe to each other's newsletters. If you launch it, at least people in the community are going to be in there. And then we show you how to ask people to join as well. So we have like a cold thing that you're going to send a text message, and maybe even like you see somebody in the street, it's a friend, you say, I started a newsletter. We teach you how to do that. Like, please subscribe to it. And this is, and it's very simple, right? And some of it might seem, very obvious, but it's very helpful. And we know, look, the reason why we know it's helpful is because we had a lot of friends that took these writing courses with us, and then we saw them fail, right? And we saw them fail because they didn't have a reason to keep publishing. And so that's where a lot of these principles, we just kind of reverse engineered our journey. And that's where a lot of this stuff that we teach in there comes from. So in terms of like, if you're not going to take the course, right, the live course, and get feedback directly from me and Chris, and we're going to workshop that and work through that in the live sessions even. But if you're not going to do that, then we recommend that you like ping your mom, your dad, your cousin, and say please, or your former colleague, and say please join. Post it. Of course, everybody has different levels of comfort, right? And so that's part of it too, is that like some people don't want to do that. Like they don't want their colleagues to be on there because for whatever. And so, it's fine. You go after a few people that you can trust, right? And maybe it's only a couple of people, but you just need to seed it. You need something. You need to publish to at least a couple of people. And then over the iterations, right? That's when the flywheel kicks in. It takes a little time, obviously, when you're starting in the beginning. But just like I said, I had a tiny audience before, and I was working through a lot of these ideas. And actually, I told Chris, like, a lot of the stuff that I tweet now, I just literally go back to my newsletter editions and I just read it. And I'm like, oh, wow, I thought about this. Now I have even more stuff to add to it. And that becomes a tweet because I'm very comfortable sharing that now. But it wasn't that way in the beginning. It took a lot of reps. Does that answer it, Kim?
Yeah, it's very helpful. Thank you, Louis.
Of course.
Thank
And
you.
we're not saying that every reader will reply or anything like that. Like you might only get a couple of replies each week, or just one a week, or one every other issue, or something like that. But there is signal in those replies, and it's even if you only get one reply, there's still signal. Someone is interested in this idea. And John, I don't want to put you on the spot, but he's replied to my newsletters and about ideas that I thought were kind of throwaways, and I was like, oh wow, that's I'm like really happy that someone found that idea interesting.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is, most people don't ask to reply. This is not like a thing. Like we noticed that this was like a really good way to get feedback from people and things like that. And so how you ask matters, right? Like most people don't even know that they can reply until you tell them like, hey, just hit reply and then I'm going to get it and I'm going to reply back. That's really important. And so we teach that and how to ask. And it's usually, we had one student was like, he was like, please, he had this like long thing, like, please. And most people don't, when you ask that way, most people are not going to reply. But if you ask a certain way, you're very likely to get some replies. And I think that's the key. But even if you don't get replies in your first, second, or third edition, you're going to get feedback from us, right? Like we're going to read it and we're going to tell you feedback live, like this. We're going to go through it. And so that's in the beginning for folks in the course, that's how they're able to bootstrap a little bit faster. But but you don't need that. I mean, we did it without that, and you know, but there's a lot of value to doing it, obviously. So, of
Thank you.
course. Anyone else? Any other questions?
I got one more if no one else does.
Of course.
I would, yeah, Henrik, you go for it first.
You sure? You sure? I was a little bit late to raise the hand, but yeah, I would love like to have your opinion on. It's like after listening to you guys talking about all those strategies, I thought back in my life about things that I did and things that I'm doing that will be very interesting to many people. But the issue is probably most of the people, they don't speak English, they speak Portuguese. And I think it will be a great idea to, you know, create a newsletter for people that speak English because it's a large public, I guess. And I just wanted to have some opinion on that. And I think I really have an interesting career and life trajectory for because I come from a developing country, and the place I am right now is kind of a privilege, even though it's not a high-paying job, a software engineering job, but still is a privilege that many people back in my country can have. So I really have a lot of content to inspire people, but most of these people, they talk Portuguese, but I would like to expand my reach to mainly English speaking people. Yeah, so what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, look, you got to share it basically. Like you have to do this. I mean, if you have an inspiring story and you think it's going to motivate and help people, I mean, at the end of the day, Henrik, is going to help you too. Like, you know, these people are, when you need them, you know, and having this, like I said, an asset, which is basically an audience and all of this is really quite valuable. And so, especially today, right, in the modern world. So I really think you have to do this, but then go into the, you know, which version should you do, the Portuguese or the English? Why not do both? I mean, you could literally have a landing page for your Portuguese version, and you could have a landing page for your English version, and you could just translate it between the two, and that could also be a really good way for you to sort of improve the English too. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but we don't actually think you have to be an amazing writer to write like a couple of sentences about the things that you're kind of and in the beginning, I mean, you could use tools and all that. Your English is perfect, but that my point is, like, if you're worried about the writing coming off a certain way or whatever, there's really good tools like Grammarly for correct. I mean, I use that, right? Like, I'm here in the US, I'm an immigrant too.
Yeah,
So
I use it a lot. Yeah.
So exactly. So, you know, so, but basically my point is you could probably do both, and you could just, you know, manage them as separate landing pages, and they just go into two different lists. And then, you know, depending on the tool you use, obviously, you could set that up. I know Danny, for example, has 2 newsletters, right, Danny? So, you know, we have 2, right? Like, we have the one that's just purely focused on writing, and we have our personal. And so there's nothing wrong with having a personal that's in both languages, and then you just each week you send them out, and it could be, you know, take you a few minutes to translate between the two, but it's worth it basically. And I think you should do it. And you know, look, it's a lot to take on, I think, to do both on day one. So maybe start with one and then move to the both, right? Because the biggest thing for us, right, is that you kind of want to see a little bit of value. You want to get a little taste that it's like kind of working. You want to get 1 or 2 replies. You want to get the flywheel going. And once that happens, then it's like, okay, this is actually a pretty cool reason to continue doing this. And so, exactly. So you basically, I think, are going to want to lower the bar as much as possible to start. And so just pick one and then introduce the other one, you know, very shortly after, or whatever it is. We don't recommend starting with something really crazy big, because what's going to happen is, and we see this all the time, is you get to the day where you're supposed to write it and you're dreading it because you have so much work to do to get it out. And so that's the key. Like, you never want to get to that point where you're like, but if you've taken, like, you know, a couple of notes about things you remembered, or a few tweets you saw, or whatever you do normally, you can put that in your Apple Notes or wherever, and then when you go to write it, I mean, it's just going to fill it in, right? Like it's going to be really easy, and so that's the key, I think. Chris, you have
when you refer to, so I'm sorry, when you
Don't
refer
worry.
to start with one, are you referring to the length of the content or the topics?
I'm referring to like one newsletter.
Okay, one newsletter.
One language. Pick one to start, and then eventually do both. I think that's, I think you should definitely do it though. I mean, it'll be, especially like you said. I mean, I think if you it sounds like you have a very inspiring story, and you should share it. I mean, those are valuable lessons, and keep in mind that the algorithms are pushing like stuff that's making people dumber, and so you're going to be doing the world a favor by sharing that stuff because people need that. I mean, I'm just, anyway, I know I'm harping on. I don't know if Chris has something to add.
Yeah, thanks. And sorry again, it's Taka, right? The person that was about to talk before me.
No, that's all good.
Okay, yeah, Taka. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Taka, your question was about if there's a way to see the metrics on people reading the newsletter versus opening.
Exactly. That's it. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm not sure. Louis, do you know? I know some providers have click-through rates and stuff like that, but I'm not sure.
Substack gives you all of that. Substack has, which editions people opened. You could literally click on a subscriber and they give you like which editions they've seen. I know Ghost has per subscriber as well. You could actually go into you could click on individuals and see like which, if they're opening your stuff. All that stuff is pretty available, but I'd say it's not that important, honestly. And the reason why is because we don't think you need to scrutinize the analytics or really like we're big fans of like this thing growing kind of with you and the people that like it, you're gonna get different people replying to different things, and it's totally fine. I mean, but they do provide the analytics like click through. I mean, I rarely look at it basically, and I'd say I've been doing just fine.
Yeah, I just don't want to like send out newsletters when no one's reading it, So that's all.
Well, the top level metric you're going to look at a lot. And the top level metric is basically like the open rate. And that's the most important thing. Like, are they opening it? And our big thing in the Launchpad is like we want to try to keep that open rate pretty high. We have recommendations that we do. I mean, obviously, the title of the newsletter matters. All these little optimizations, they're all optimizations. They might shift the open rate by 10%. You might go from 50 to 60 or from 60 to 70. We have one student, Christine, who went all the way up to 80% on her open rate. But again, it's an optimization. It's not, even if only 50% are, on any given week, and it's usually a different group. Like this week I want to read it, it's enticing, this week I don't. And that's fine. I mean, that's that's why, especially because we recommend you bring friends and family in there. You don't want to find out your mom didn't read it. Then you're like, man,
No, my mom will not read that because she doesn't speak English. So.
Well, I'm just
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it makes sense.
But
Thanks.
you're going to look at a lot, Taka. Like basically the open rates, I think, is really important. You want to keep that high, and if it's dropping, it's usually because it's either going into junk or there's other things happening that you need to figure out. Sometimes it's settings, sometimes it's different things.
Sure, makes sense. Got it.
Very
well,
good.
thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the great questions. I'm sure the people that are watching the recording are going to appreciate the questions.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Very cool. So we're a couple minutes over, I think, Chris. So if we don't have any more questions, we really appreciate you all joining, participating. We hope it was helpful. But thank you very much. It was great to meet you all.